So now it's live on YouTube, and I actively hate technology. Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how I actively hate technology. So the TikTok side, you guys have heard it all, but the YouTube side is only now getting started, which I'm gonna have to repeat all that, but I'm not going to. We're just gonna dive right in. So we're stuck on the word of the day. We're on the word of the day for the YouTube crowd that's now tuning in because Restream kind of bamboozles me. Um, so the word of the day, as I was saying, was cat corner. Place, yeah. So the word spelling, I would place it if I could, but I'll spell it out for you. It's CATERCORNER, and I know it reads like cater corner, but it's actually catty corner. I literally listened to the pronunciation from Merriam-Webster. So as I was saying, it takes its base from Katsu, which means four, and then because the four spots on a die can suggest an X, it eventually came to be used dialectically as a verb, meaning to place, move, or cut across diagonally. It was later combined with corner to form catty corner to describe things positioned diagonally from each other. In one early usage, actually from an 1825 magazine article, the author marvels at an ancient Roman fresco painting in which a luxurious table is represented as groaning under four peacocks with their tails set catty corner. So eventually, the variant kitty corner, which is now the more common form, was developed. And despite all appearances, these terms bear no etymological relation to our feline friends, the cat. So again, if you're just joining me on the YouTube side of the stream, Restream bamboozled me, so you're a little late to the game. Um, I went through my my hot drink, which is always going to be coffee, and the hot take, which was just a kind of shout out to our Group 8 FBE students. So moving on then to the game of the month. Game of the month, even though I didn't get a chance to game a lot because of course it was Carnival, was The Expanse: Osiris Reborn, the beta. So The Expanse is a sci-fi space opera that I've actually spoken about on the live stream because they look at really scientific concepts, and it's one of the more scientifically accurate TV shows that have ever been produced. Like we're talking interstellar level accuracy. And all cat games have been developing a new choice-based video game around the Expanse universe. So think along the lines of Dragon Age, Mass Effect, where your choices matter. So I actually pre-ordered the game, which means that I got access to the closed beta. And a beta, for those who may not know, is a early version of the game that's used to test out any hiccups, kinks, or backlogs that can then be ironed out in its further development by the time it gets to launch. Now, do betas always work? Sometimes, but if you ever played Mass Effect Andromeda, you know that it needed a longer beta. So I did enjoy the beta immensely. My one issue was with the voice acting. So The Expanse has very clearly developed lore about the people you encounter in the show and in the universe. So Earthers, Martians. At the time in the show, we've colonized Mars. So you have persons who've been born on Mars and such, but you also have Belters who were born in the asteroid belts that supply Mars and Earth with certain materials that go to developing their spaceships and other forms of technology. Now, the Belters speak almost a kind of space Creole, and they have their own accents, gestures, etc. That's really well explained in the books and also really well explored in the show. That's missing so far from the game. So I chose to play a Belter um, um, technician, and she sounds just like someone from Florida. So yeah, I'm hoping that this is something that they take into consideration, because when I look at like the forums and the feedback from beta testers on the beta, that's the main complaint that everyone has. Other than that, everyone's pretty happy with the gameplay, with the mechanics. So yeah, I'm hoping there's something maybe they can add or fix in post production. But that was my game of the month, The Expanse: Osiris Reborn beta. And I can tell you already, end of May, the game of the month is going to be James Bond 007, First Light. So very excited about that game as well, coming from the developers of Hitman. So on to the main topics. Carnival, guys. So Carnival 55 had its hiccups, both minor and major. However, I do believe we had a good festival overall. I think what this carnival showed me, and it's not just this carnival, others and other events on the island have also shown me, is bigger does not necessarily mean better. better comes with the need for scalability. So if your event is growing by X amount of attendees per year, then you should ensure you have Y invested in scaling up to ensure that there's no loss in the quality of user experience. Um, I look at, for example, Juve. Juve was a massive crush of people. It was almost too crowded where we were. And I think, that caused me to kind of step out and walk alongside, or just kind of, take a moment to breathe and get some air. So yeah, I think, and that goes for shows in the village as well. That you've sold X amount of tickets, your show has grown by X amount of people year over year. You should try to find ways to not diminish user experience. And that's not to say that the shows were bad. It's just something for us to also think about when it comes to, what can be done in the festival village, what should be done in the festival village in terms of booth design, booth build out, and so forth. Because at the end of the day, you limit space the bigger you go, for those who are attending the events. Grand Parade, just want to give a shout out. Congratulations as well to Love Lux Mass, to Tavi, and the entire team. I was so proud to be a part of their growth for year two. Thank you to everyone who complimented me on my back piece and overall costume. Shout out again to Bernard and to me for making sure my shoulders, back, and core didn't collapse on either day of the parade. Um, However, and this is something that I have addressed with my troop leader, with SCDF, and in general, I think with persons in that Carnival space, this nasty business music, or zest, or whatever you want to call it, on the road for Grand Parade has got to stop. And to be honest, it's gotten to a point where I'm willing to do what all other islands have done and implement legislative and policy controls to this type of thing, where you will get a fine. You will be fined if you play that music on the road, whether you are a band, whether you are a DJ, whether you are local, whether you are foreign. You cannot get away with playing those types of songs on the road in another Caribbean country. And don't come for me like I don't know, because I do. Young brother, who got his start in Zest, would never dare to sing a song like Ambiance during Trinidad's main parade. It's simply not done. And everyone acts like there's been no other music released over the last 3 years. In fact, I had to kind of pull up our DJ, and I think King Verse even mentioned it on an interview he did with G Money on the AMPM Workload Show, where, I said, no, I would rather take you off this truck. I'll stop this whole parade as Minister of Culture, because I'm taking a picture with someone's children who asked me as Minister of Education and Youth to take a picture. And in the background, you're hearing, don't give the no more whiskey. Are you nuts? So yeah, very sorry. There's a reason artists, whether Caribbean, US, whatever, have been arrested and fined in certain countries when they use profanity on a stage, on a truck, on a ball field, whenever, wherever, Shakira, Shakira. So that's something that I definitely will be consulting with my colleague ministers on, to implement fines. And at the end of the day, get off the truck. If you don't listen, if you don't want to obey our rules, because you can't go St. Kitts and do that. I can tell you that. I know persons who are involved in planning sugar mass. You can't do it. You want to play it in a fete, you want to play it at Juve, because children are not supposed to be in Juve anyway. Fine. But Grand Parade, where our students are lining the street, very sorry. Not something that I'm willing to tolerate any further. And, I remember back in the day, King Timo, yeah, got into trouble for his song Vix's for Cough. Now, if you say Vix's for Cough super fast with our accent, you know what word you're getting. But even that nuance was something that people were like, hey, and that is a song you heard during Juve, but you didn't hear it during Grand Parade. So I think that keeping that sort of respect for the fact that there are young people out there, and that, yeah, it makes it distasteful. I step out to the parade when those songs come on, because again, I'm taking pictures with kids that are running in. They see their ministers, they see their MPs, they want to take pictures with pretty costumes, and in the background, okay. So yeah, and it's nothing against Bouillon, because I think unfortunately it's been kind of framed as an anti-Bouillon thing. I've heard Bouillon with no nasty business in it. So let's be all the way together for real. And but definitely, if people are not gonna listen, because this is something that, band leaders have said they've warned DJs about. I think the DJ said, well, they told me I can't cuss on the mic. No, big man. Your performance is the music you play, not your voice on the mic. So you can't cuss on the mic, and you got to make sure that you don't play nasty business music in our grand parade. So that is just a bit of an advance warning, so that next year when I hit out with $1,000 fine, you know, to then be used for the development of educational materials for public and subsidized education, I hear no complaints from local and foreign DJs, because I don't like the framing as well that it's just foreign DJs doing it. It's not. Um, our DJs are also guilty of it. I also really don't understand how the only Samantha music anyone could find is what's been released for the last 2 years, and barely even that. So do better is basically the message there. Um, I also had a lot of fun during Carnival. Most of you saw my oyster soup competition, and also behind the door, featuring booth holders and highlighting what goes into running a booth. Shout out again to the Hazel sisters for allowing me to participate in filming, and allowing me to fry their Johnny cakes and to take them out and package them, just kind of showing the chaos that happens behind running a booth, and in fact running any service industry and then hospitality industry entity. So I've worked in a restaurant. I know what it is to be a waitress. I know what it is to be a bartender. It is stressful, guys. So always have respect for the people behind the booth, the people behind the door. Can you believe 500 Johnny cakes a night is what they go through at Booth 75 alone? So you can imagine, if you look at like a Bad Boy satays and everything, like you could imagine what they go through in terms of making and preparing and cooking and selling satays, Johnny cakes, etc. Special thank you to Joanny Fuentes, who's now 2 years into my oyster soup shenanigans. Joa, it's always a good time. I want to give again a thanks to Zoe Mercedes for joining us as well for the oyster soup competition. To Nautis from Local Star Media on production, filming, and editing. That was just amazingly done. I know it was a headache because we were really muppeting behind the scenes. But we had a good time overall. Next year, definitely want to expand on our behind the scenes, behind the door content, and bring you more culture focused content as well. I saw persons saying, we should include the strip, which is outside the village and such. So definitely things to talk about and think about for 2027. I want to touch a bit as well on the visit of iShow Speed. It was amazing that his quick stop turned into a whole lot more. We were intended to be one of 4 islands he visited on that day, with us being the end of the day. So there's something about Simatin, I think, that people always tell me, makes them want to stay a bit longer. So it was nice to see that effect hit him and his team. So they stayed for a few more days than they intended to. There's a lot to say as well, I think, about understanding these new developing ways for young people to be and to exist. But that's for the discussion for another time. Young people had a blast. The adults seem to be very confused on where to fit in. But I think again, it's I've grown up in a time where I've seen the advent of streamer culture. From a gamer and geek culture perspective, we've seen people like iShow Speed way before iShow Speed even existed. So talking about back in the day, certain gamers. I've watched one of my favorite YouTubers to watch play games and review games is the Rad Brad. I've watched Rad Brad from the point of when he started as university student streaming Call of Duty to now, where he's getting paid partnerships from Sony and such to stream games. He's getting games in advance. So yeah, it's when I tell people about people like Rad Brad, iShow Speed, Mr. Beast, etc., they're like, "Who are these people? What do they do?" I said, "Well, they stream." And most times, persons older than me don't really get it. So yeah, it's interesting. Disappointing though that his team had reached out for programming help and didn't really get that from our tourist bureau. I'm not sure if, again, this is due to lack of knowledge on who he was or so, but I am happy that Calaboom and Skeleton and the rest were able to kind of step in, plan programming, and turn a short stop into a multi-day experience for him, especially during the highlight of our Carnival season. That he got to be on the truck, on the road with Machel, was also great for me to see. So yeah, youthpreneur events where young people can host their poots and pay a small fee. That would be interesting. That's an interesting concept. I'd be willing to explore that. DM me. That was a comment on the TikTok stream. So the TikTok stream be commenting, guys. You YouTube people, you don't do that. Um, So yeah, young people as well. You guys were out in full effect. It was nice to see everyone on the road having a great time. We didn't have that many issues with fighting or bad behavior from our young members of society, and I was very thankful for that. That we had a mostly quiet and safe carnival. Um, Moving right along to updates now on the trust fund side. So we had an FRLP mission last week. Imagine that they planned a FRLP mission the day after Bacchanal Sunday. So, but nevertheless, I was there with my team. The projects under FRLP are, of course, the MMIS, the Ministry Management Information System, as well as the construction projects of Sister Marie Laurence, Charles Leopold Bell, and the Simatin Library. So all of those projects are moving along quite well. I'm very happy to see that. Construction on SML. If you live in Mid-Region Defiance or you drive through there, you can see that they're busy on the site every day. They marked out, they did their surveying. Now they're focusing on foundation pouring and stuff as mobilization continues, and you'll see more activity ramp up there in the Mid-Region area. So very happy to see that moving forward. The Charles Leopold Bell tender is closing soon. Of course, this had to be retendered due to a failed tender earlier in the year. And then the letter of award has been given out regarding the library, I believe. So we expect to see movement on that soon. And the library is, of course, a project near and dear to my heart. As an avid reader, as someone who spent a lot of time in our library. And so I'm looking forward to it becoming that community space once again for young people. In particular, those who attend Sundial, Charlotte Brookson Academy, St. Joseph, and schools around your school, those schools that are in town, that it really used to be their spot. I remember, we would go to the library, St. Dominic uniform, and then this town-based schools would kind of watch you like, what are you doing here? But it was our library. So looking forward to seeing that again. And I will, of course, continue to update you all on the progress of the Trust Fund projects related to ECYS as they move along. With regards to Parliament, the urgent OVA on the sanitation of public schools is closed. We closed that out right before the peak of the Carnival season. But really, that meeting was about the long existing donation and visitation procedure that has existed within public education since before I was minister. I ended off my clarifications in round two with this very simple statement, which was, if we can show respect to subsidized school boards and their processes for receiving donations and or visits to their schools, then the same respect should be shown to public education and its processes and procedures by especially our public servants. So that was my closing line on that particular matter. Still pending, of course, is the return of for me on the EGMA results. I still have questions to answer from that meeting. Tomorrow I'm in Parliament at 10:30, answering questions on sports funding, specifically the pending 1 cent levy on imported gasoline that is meant to go towards funding the local development of sports. These are questions. So there's a question hour of Parliament, which means I have the questions already in advance. They come from MP Dimar Labega, and I already have the answers. So the intention of a question hour is just to kind of go in, read off the questions, answer the questions quickly. We can take some follow-ups for about 2 minutes per MP, and then thereafter, we will close the meeting. So it's question hours are really a good way to get quick answers from a minister. They're not meant to have like 15 questions that are asked by an MP. 5 questions are usually the norm, 5 targeted questions where you get your responses, and then you can move on. So that will be me tomorrow, 10:30 in Parliament for that question hour. The first time we called this meeting, we didn't have any quorum. So here's hoping that we have quorum this time around and we can give an update on that. But yes, so that is for funding towards the local development of sports. This is in keeping, of course, with what I've been saying consistently before and since taking office, which is that public funding must be maximized in any way possible to fund the local development of athletes and sports programs in our schools and for our young people. When you've placed the focus heavily on travel and such, you kind of lose the point of government involvement in sports, which is facilitating the local atmosphere for growth and progress. So really looking forward to giving you guys an update on that in Parliament tomorrow at 10:30. Regarding the supervision of education law, some changes had to be made to the explanatory notes, the so-termed Memorie van Toelichting. So that has been handled now and will come back to the ministry and then continue its movement through the legislative process. So while we're a bit behind schedule, I still expected to get to Parliament after their recess, which was our target timeline to begin with. With regards to culture and arts, So upcoming, we have Flag Day, which is not a holiday actually, but it is still something that we celebrate as a country, which is the adoption of the Simatin flag by the then Island Council. We're taking this opportunity this year to find new economic ways of actually addressing our days of celebration, our national days of celebration. I see a question here. I just want to update. So, in that supervision of education law, there is the anti-hair discrimination consideration. So that law is a packet, and anti-hair discrimination is in that particular law. So just to answer that. Um, yeah, so we're trying to find new economical ways of addressing these national days. So you will see that happening first with Flag Day. I hope to be able to provide a update in press briefing tomorrow. I won't be able to take questions, but I will definitely give an update and then go to Parliament on how we plan to approach that. And then following Flag Day, we have Emancipation Day, which is the 1st of July. Emancipation Day is actually being organized through collaboration with the Department of Culture, SMDF, and the Kingdom Slavery Memorial Committee. So that committee has committed $30,000 in funds to organizing the 2026 Emancipation Day, which government will match as we reflect on, the day in which slavery was abolished on the Dutch side of the island. And last year's Emancipation Day, if you managed to come out, was really incredible. We had a art installation dedicated to the Zausteg 3, which are the remains that were found when the road by the Chamber of Commerce was being repaired in 2015, I want to say. This year, I'm very excited to see what kind of program and content the Department of Culture and the organizations that they collaborate with have come up with to commemorate Emancipation Day for 2026. Also, during Carnival, we had Star Wars Meets Carnival. So a couple months ago, Nick Malley of the Yoda Guy Museum reached out to me about a contest he wanted to do with our students. So Nick Malley is actually one of the creature artists who helped design the original Yoda character on the original Star Wars trilogy. So the hands, the eyes, the mouth movements, he was a big part of that development for Yoda. So he's had the Yoda Guy Museum here since I was a kid. If you've never been, I strongly urge you to pass by. There's a lot of cool Star Wars memorabilia in there. You learn a lot about the movies he's worked on. You learn a lot about creature effects, both from the old school and the new. A lot now is visual effects using AI and other forms of technology and programs to kind of get it done. But back then, you had to make those things with your hands, build the robotics yourself. So definitely for those who are interested in robotics, and in movies, I strongly suggest you pass by the Yoda Guy Museum. So on campus, that's okay. So he asked me to, facilitate that the schools know about about this project, about this concept and this contest he wanted to do. So students were invited to create a piece of art, whether a painting or drawing or even a short story where Star Wars characters meet Simat Carnival. So we, read some stories where Grand Admiral Thrawn was trying to stop the carnival celebrations and stuff like that. So really great, content that was provided by the students, and even the artwork, stormtroopers in Carnival costumes, is Yoda in feathers and such. So definitely a very interesting contest. However, 9 students ended up participating. And, what I realized since becoming minister is that there are a lot of initiatives in there for young people that I think they don't know about. And it really depends on their school board, I think. So we sent it out to the school boards and asked them to disseminate the information to teachers and such so that more students would be able to participate. But that did not happen apparently because many students had no idea that it was happening. The students that did participate knew because their teachers were directly informed. So that's definitely something that I think for us, because it happened with us as well with the National Short Story Contest, which is actually being launched next week now that Carnival is over and we've all recovered. I do encourage parents to check out the ministry's social media pages, my social media pages, to see what's happening that, kids can participate in. And of course, I know many students watch my TikTok live, so feel free to ask about the short story contest or things that are going on that are meant for young people to participate in, show their creative side and such. So I want to congratulate the winners as well of this Star Wars Meets Carnival contest. They received goodie bags filled with Star Wars swag, including mint condition comics and graphic novels from the Star Wars universe. And I look forward to the Yoda guy putting that on again. Um, and that's generally the updates that I have for today. I do want to touch on something. The YouTube people can't see it, but it's a discussion in the TikTok chat about students, boys, allegedly having their hair shaved on campus. That came following the question about the hair discrimination law. So if things like that are happening, I want to advise that we have a division inspectorate of education, and you are very much able to report anything that you think violates a student's rights or a student's well-being to the inspectorate of education. Um, you can find that contact information on the ministry's social media pages as well as on government's website. And I will make a concerted effort as well to have a post go out to put it all in one place for you. If that has happened to any male student at Sundell or any school, um, very sorry that that happened to you, because that is no doubt traumatic. And that's not what we want to see. That's not what education should be about. That's been my mantra for quite some time since I was in Parliament when I first started addressing the hair discrimination that our students experience, especially at a primary level. But to hear this now at a high school level is a little beyond. So um, sorry for that. I see a question about purchasing a building in the Netherlands, which our students can then pay rent to government. So this is something that was discussed in the past. In the past, we would have room blocks, and there was discussion about buying a building, but I think it's not as easy as that. Owning real estate in a different country is a, as they say, a different kettle of fish. It is something that was, briefly discussed with me, but I'll be upfront as I always am. From a budget perspective, we don't have that funding right now. What I have been working on is trying to get room blocks that don't require much. From a financial commitment from government, but that we save, that certain housing corporations make rooms available in various cities. In fact, last year on one of the live streams, I shared the fact that if you were going to Groningen, for example, or Tilburg, that there was a housing corporation that was willing to, that had 6 or 7 rooms open. That's not usually the cities where our students go. Our students tend to stick in the Randstad, so Rotterdam, Utrecht, Amsterdam, and Den Haag. But we are still trying to, navigate a scenario where maybe with Curacao and Aruba, we can commit to, having a room block. This is something I also plan to bring up in the Vierlanden Overleg, the 4-country overview, which we have with the education ministers of the different countries. And yeah, private investors, it will be up to them if they want to engage and invest in something like that. I would say, go ahead. There was even a point in time when I lived in the Netherlands where myself and some young professionals were like, "Can we maybe buy a building?" And that's something that I always say, is possible from private persons. The challenge you have is that everyone, not just St. Martin students, are going through housing crises. You have European Dutch students who have to live at home with mom and dad because they can't find housing. And there's different things that contribute to that. I remember Amsterdam had to put in legislation to restrict persons renting out more than one property they owned on Airbnb. That's something that we see happening here, where what should be apartments dedicated to your housing market are actually going to short-term rentals. So that's, this disruption in certain industries is good until it begins to disrupt to a point where it erodes the market. And that's what you saw happening in the Netherlands. People would own, 3, 4 properties, and all of them would be on Airbnb. And then you don't have anything in the pool for those who need to rent. So yeah, so that's definitely something there. So I do have a meeting at 9:30 before we have the COM meeting. So this was the updates that I could provide today, and next week we'll be back as well with more updates. Thank you for tuning in. Apologies to the YouTube crowd for the um, for the technical difficulty where we started later than the TikTok crowd did, but I'll make sure to have my tech stuff sorted out. But you plan, and then technology bamboozles you. So thanks again to everyone for tuning in, and I will catch you guys next week, and have a great